Are you getting ready for retirement? About 70% of those who are getting ready for retirement have a couple of things that they need to get ready for, and it has nothing to do with finances. We are talking socially and emotionally getting retired. And so let's talk, and my guest tonight is Dr. Marti Erickson. Thank you so much for joining me. You are co-host of Mom Enough. That is a great podcast.
Yeah, I've been doing that for 8 years. We were on the radio 4 years before that. My daughter, Erin Erickson, is my co-host. She has a doctorate in women's health, and we just have a ball doing it.
And you really have quite a following now on that.
Well, we do. We're getting more than 300,000 listeners and people visiting our website, momenough.com. And, you know, it's just been something that in my retirement has turned into a not so retired situation, but it's a lot of fun. And I have good information.
Yeah, let's talk about this one, because you're actually the one who found that statistic that the three things that people aren't ready for is they're not in control of their retirement. They're not financially prepared for their retirement. But the third was being socially and emotionally prepared for retirement. And that number one challenge is loss of social connection.
It is, and you know, I think people experience that in lots of different ways, but certainly most of us, I think, have very strong social connections with people with whom we work. And, you know, we might really have very close relationships outside of work with those people. And so when we're no longer in the workplace on a day-to-day basis, it can really be a very tough awakening. And many people also move around the same time they retire, and a lot of our friendships are based in our neighborhood. So some people really experience a double loss.
And so if your identity then is also through your job, that's another loss.
Yes, and you know, I think both men and women these days, because women are so fully in the workforce, even when they're raising children, both men and women, I think, draw much of their personal sense of identity and their purpose in life from their jobs. Now, also raising children, you know, that's a big sense of purpose and a huge responsibility for both moms and dads. But when you lose that identity through your work, it can really make you question who you are, and do I have meaning? Do I have a strong purpose and intent in my life if I'm no longer working for pay?
Right, exactly. You know, I'll admit that's the first thing that I missed after leaving Channel 11 was the interaction that I had with people who I was interviewing. I mean, I really liked my coworkers, and I got along fine there, but it was that interaction of feeling like I was giving meaning to people who are watching because I was helping with their knowledge base, right?
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to be one of your guests many, many times over the years there, and
I'm very thankful you joined me tonight.
Well, I am too. It's really fun to reconnect this way, and you do such a beautiful job of interviewing people and really drawing out what they know and what they care deeply about. So.
And there's a second area here that we need to talk about. That's the challenge that you identified. And again, loss of the sense of purpose and identity. So in a lot of cases, and for me, this was true because a lot of what I did or my purpose was tied to my work.
Right. And you know, you talked about what I'm doing now with Mom Enough, but my main career was as a professor and a director of a very large consortium on children, youth, and families at the University of Minnesota. And I was in the 1990s working at the White House almost every week for 8 years, you know, as a family policy advisor to the Vice President of the United States. And you know, those are kind of heady things.
Yes.
And it was work that really just tapped into my passion about trying to make this a better world for children and families. And I think we've fallen very short in that regard in our society. So when I retired 10 years ago, I retired fairly early from the university and really had to grapple with no longer having that kind of visibility and that, you know, dynamic intellectual energy that came from working with other people who shared my same passion for children and families and how policy and professional practice affects the well-being of children and families. So that was really, you know, a time of transition for me, and I relate very personally to what so many people experience, whatever the nature of their work.
Well, in that particular case, that's one of those things where you moved on to whatever your next goal was and the purpose, which is, again, Mom Enough. We have a light that's going on and off.
Yes.
You'll have to bear with us on that one. Again, this is our living room, and things do have funny things.
I know. I do my podcast in my living room.
Oh,
and we've had all sorts of things happen.
Well, again, part of the fix we're talking about then for the sense of purpose and identity, you say, see if you can volunteer at work.
Well, volunteer in general, and a lot of people do find that going back to their workplace, if it lends itself to that, they can mentor young professionals in their field or younger workers. They can do things that they used to wish were available in the workplace. And then there are many, many other places to volunteer, of course, and some people like a total change of direction. Or I know people in my field who have ended up volunteering, working directly with abused children, for example, getting trained as a guardian ad litem, for example. Really, really important work that's related to their field. So each person has to kind of examine what they really want, what their passion is at this stage of life, and it may be the same or it may be different.
Right, and you also suggest maybe some advanced learning or maybe writing a family history.
Yes, and I know a number of people in their 60s and 70s who, thanks to the wealth of information on the internet and also just their own memories and wanting to leave their stories for their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, are doing that. And I remember in my own life, my oldest granddaughter, who's now almost 14, when she was about 6 or 7, she used to ask me to tell my stories from when I was a child or a teenager or earlier in my career. And she would just listen and say, tell me that same story again. I want to memorize it so I never forget it, which touched me very deeply. And at one point then she said, Grandma, you just have to write your important stories so I'll always have them.
Oh, nice.
And so that is something I'm doing along with a number of other things, and I'm limping along with that, but I'm writing a memoir particularly with my grandchildren in mind. I have no particular expectations or even hopes of publishing it or sharing it with a larger well, I mean that's not driving me at all, but I really want my grandchildren to have this, and there are things in our family and our extended family, mental illness and abuse, and some things that I think are really important for all of us to talk honestly about and come to grips with. And I think writing some of my story, and to the extent I know it, the story of my own parents who were teenagers and very poor, and so those are things that I really want to put down in writing. And I know that other people would have different perspectives on the same stories, but I think there's a lot of value in that, and that really does give me a particular sense of purpose, and I know other people as well who are doing that.